Hello and welcome to the Primary PE Huddle podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Education. Aspire Active Education is a passionate family who all believe that PE, sport and physical activity are essential for children to develop a love of healthy living and to end physical inactivity forever. We've proven that working in collaboration with school leadership teams, PE subject leaders, teachers and all PE practitioners positively impacts the sustainability of schools embedding a powerful physical curriculum and essentially helps more children be more active more often. Our mission is to engage 1 million children in physical activity by 2025, and we hope this podcast brings others along our journey with us. Through this podcast series, we aim to discover the power behind PE, school sport and physical activity, specifically in primary schools, the impact this has on the whole school, the impact it has on pupils' holistic development, and the secrets behind the successful implementation of a powerful physical curriculum. This is what makes up the Primary PE Huddle. We won't be alone through this journey. We're joined by PE subject leaders, school and academy senior leadership teams, experts in the field of primary education, and representatives of key sector bodies, who all share what physical activity means to them, how they use it as a tool to positively impact children and young people, and what they believe in the Primary PE Huddle. Our guests perform a deep dive on topics such as creating sustainable high quality PE, the benefits of physical activity, a top-down collaboration to embed a physically active ethos, and sharing of best practice from their own experiences to create an enthusiastic culture towards a healthy and active lifestyle. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Primary PE Huddle. Today we're joined by Lee. Lee's from BDMAT, which is a multi-academy trust of schools across the Birmingham West Midlands area. Lee's coming from a different kind of perspective than we've had before on the podcast, so really excited to have him on board. Lee's coming from a financial perspective, so it'll be really great to get your take, Lee, throughout this whole episode. We're trying to get contrasting views, and we have some people that might be heavily involved in the finances, some people that they don't have that responsibility, aren't involved. So it'd be good to spread things, spread different views. Again, for those listening, it's Dan, and actually today my co-host is Ollie Burton, who used to work with you, Lee. So Ollie, do you want a quick background, introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Ollie. I've been with Aspire for the last over 6 months. But previously I worked for BDMAT and in charge of the PE across the multi-academy trust on a number of schools and handled their budget. So I worked quite closely with Lee and his team, looking after the sports premium. So we've got to know each other quite well. So I will hand over to Lee to introduce himself and his role to everyone.
Great, thank you guys. My name's Lee Davis, as you've said. I'm the head of finance at BDMAT at the Birmingham Diocesan Multi-Academy Trust. And I've worked in education since 2014. I trained as a school business manager a little while after I joined education and joined BDMAT with one of the schools as a business manager. And before that, in my life pre-education, I worked in retail accounting and finance in various roles. So I've had a bit of experience outside of the education sector. And that's how I ended up falling into this role.
Love the phrase, falling into the role. Love that. So I normally ask most guests about naming one thing they wish they'd known before starting their specific role. Yours is a slightly different angle, but given the background you just mentioned there about the different experience in finance in different areas such as retail and so on, I'm going to flip it slightly and say, can you name one thing you wish you'd known before starting a finance role in the education sector? Because I think it's a bit of a different beast, the education sector.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very good question. And when you talk to people in finance and accounting, we will always say finance and accounting is finance and accounting wherever you go. So that element of the job, we've got it nailed down. That's fine. It's the other exciting side of the job, the area that you're dealing with, the sort of the coalface, and retail is very different to education. There are some similarities, and some people in education maybe didn't enjoy me reminding them of some of the similarities, but there are some. But from a finance point of view, it was broadly the same. It's just that we're dealing with an area where you don't have anywhere near as much control over what income comes into your school as you would into a retail environment. So the money is fed to you largely from the Department for Education, and because of that, you do feel a little bit out of control at times, and it makes things like budgeting, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, quite tricky. But because you just don't feel like you've got that control, or that you're able to make that impact sometimes that you'd like to be able to.
Yeah, I bet it's a bit of a nightmare. I mean, we're recording this now just after the announcement, for the PE and Sport Premium, which happened in March, which is a godsend. But how was it for you not knowing whether that money was coming in for the last couple of years until June, July time?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And as you said, it's always been the case. It feels like it's a nice surprise at the end of the year, and I always say that if we weren't going to get that money, someone would have told us sooner, because there are people's livelihoods at risk here if that funding's not there, because it's a decent chunk of money to schools, and they're really specific on what they use it on. So if that money isn't turning up, someone would let us know. But there's always that doubt, and so to suddenly hear that we've got it for a couple of years and we know what's going to happen with it, it's really nice. It means you can plan ahead a little bit further ahead than we usually would, which feels really powerful.
Yeah, and I suppose on that, with having that power now and having more time to plan, your background's from financial side of things, but just to get your opinion on it, what's your perspective on the PE and Sport Premium? What importance do you personally see in that sport premium?
Yeah, so it's a good question. What I find really sort of powerful again about it is the fact that there's no other curriculum area that has funding specific to it like the sports and PE has, and that shows how important that is to the DfE. They wouldn't give that funding specifically to an area if they didn't think it was important, if they didn't think that we as educators could do something really good with it. And so I think the fact that we've got this as a specific pot of money with a specific purpose is really good. It makes my job easy in a sense, because we've got some nice guidelines as to what we can use that money for. And there's some nice ways to keep track of how we're using it. And there are loads of experts out there like you guys whose job it is to work out how best to use that and how best to make the most of that. So I think it's great.
Yeah, and the advantage we've got in this episode, we've got Ollie with us as well. I don't know if you want to start on this one, Ollie, actually, but how we've been able to have that pot money specifically for a subject, being able to work with Lee. How did you two work it so that a PE lead and the head of finance can work so collaboratively together?
Well, without trying to step on Lee's toes here, we work quite closely, especially when we're in certainly in the one school, and Lee was the business manager, where we sort of sit down and assess for the year and see what impact we can make throughout the year on that process. And certainly with the announcement that's recently come out, we got it for the next 2 years. It would be interesting, Lee, if we were still in the same situation as to what we could do with it. I know I thought it to myself, if I was in that situation and had 2 years worth of that funding, and the impact would almost double. And that's sort of how we look at it, in terms of you look at the impact you can make with the children, nothing more. Lee, would you agree with that?
Yes, totally. And I think the reason that we got on is that you understood the reason behind budgeting for this, and the need for managing it from a finance point of view as well as an education outcome point of view. And so we got on from that point of view because we both understood where each other were coming from, which is really key, because you can't manage an area without having a good understanding of the financial implications of that.
Yeah, and that just got bigger and bigger as more schools became involved in the MAT, and you started moving up to the central team, and then I took my role as the PE coordinator for the central BDMAT team, and that just sort of got as that together, and we made more impact, and you're still seeing that impact across the Multi Academy Trust now.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that's one of the key positives of Multi Academy Trusts is that it gives people scope to expand on their roles if they've got the ability and the wish to do so. And you're right with your role that was created for that central sports premium coordinator. It really suited your strengths, and it enabled us to do something a little bit different with our funding than we'd done before. And I'm all for that, whether it's something that works or something that doesn't work. The fact that we're trying something different means that we're thinking about it. It's not something we're just saying, right, we've got this money every year, let's just use it. Let's just pass this money to an external provider and wish them luck. We were thinking constantly about what we wanted to do with it, and sending it to an external provider, it's certainly no bad thing. They're the experts often, but you've got to make sure that you're involved as the trust or as the school to be involved in how that's spent.
Yeah, definitely. It's that collaborative approach. And I suppose, because we have different people who listen to this podcast, Lee, from different positions, but maybe something more for those that are heading up PE, specifically in primary schools. If they might be new to the role or being given a bit of financial responsibility, need to speak to the business manager in the school or whoever it might be. If you were back in that role and say Ollie wasn't in place and you had someone new come to you, how would you like them to prepare to bring ideas to you to begin that planning, rather than coming to you and saying, Lee, we've got this money, what are we doing? What would you like them to start putting together for you in advance of that conversation?
The perfect place to start is to come with that idea. Okay. There's nothing worse than keeping that idea to yourself and sitting thinking, I wish we'd done something different with that. The idea of you coming in with it doesn't have to be a fully fledged idea, but it has to be an idea that you put a bit of thought into. It can't be something that you just had a thought of on the playground when you've seen a pupil do something that you think that will work. It needs to be a bit more meat to it, but having that idea is a really good start. And like I say, it's having that relationship with the school. I think relationships in schools between people in different roles is really key, because you can't be that sports coordinator without having that relationship with the head teacher, with the business manager, with your pastoral team, and the list goes on. So it's having that ability to not be scared to have that conversation. And as a business manager, I never would have turned Ollie down. If he came with an idea that just couldn't work, I would never, hopefully, make him feel stupid for it. I'd make sure that we sort of discussed it to the point that it could be useful, and then we work our way through it and carry on.
Yeah, that leads me nicely actually to something I wanted to pick your brains on, and again, because we've had people from many different positions within schools and externals of schools, and I've asked similar questions to them, but again, like I said at the start, no one from a finance perspective, and we always try and get some tips of how we can get all these key people working together best. You mentioned about not being afraid to have that conversation and bring that idea, but logistically, what would be the best way, any tips for finance teams or personnel to work closely with head teachers, with subject leads, and get them together as a team to be that driving force? It should really come from the top to impact the whole school. And
like you say, it has to come from the top. So whether you're a standalone academy, a school, or a trust, or an organisation such as yourselves, it has to be someone at the top that has to drive that. Because there has to be the buy-in from everyone below that person. And sometimes the easiest way to get that is get that leader to lead, to make sure that everyone's in that conversation. So once you've got the buy-in of the senior leadership, that conversation should flow quite nicely and easily. Like I say, it's got to be that kind of egos left outside the room. Everyone's happy to have that conversation, and there's no such thing as a stupid idea, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. And that's the key thing. I think we've talked about collaboration, but it's always something I'll go back to is making sure that you've got that collaboration with people. People have got to be able to work together. And if there's not that environment that they feel comfortable in doing so, you're not going to get the best out of people and not going to get those ideas from people.
Yeah, and that can. It's an obstacle that we've heard a few times on some of the episodes, and also some schools we work with is that obstacle of that collective team not coming together or aligning, and that's a common headache and a brick wall that someone would come against. So, Ollie, I don't know how you found it from your perspective and how you try to get people to get that buy-in.
Yeah, I think like with the whole conversation around collaboration, I think the finance side of education and that side of things is more important than ever. And that's across not just PE, that's across the entire curriculum. It's something that is more and more important. So it is the most important thing, and to have that link with the finance team.
Did you face whether it was at school, other schools? I know you worked in other settings, whether it's from an external organisation. Did you face any situations where you had barriers to those conversations?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is conversations around time, isn't it, Lee? Everyone in schools, as everyone knows, it's all really busy. But like Lee's already said, in terms of leaving egos outside the door, no idea is a bad idea. It's having those conversations and taking the time for those conversations, and doesn't necessarily have to be PE based. This can be around any subject. I mean, I'm sure there are schools out there that don't struggle with PE, but then they also struggle in other subjects, and they need to have those conversations somewhere else. And it could be PSHE, it could be any subject that they need to have those sort of conversations. But it is having those conversations that's the important thing. And the finances of those sort of subjects are becoming more and more important.
Yeah, I found that when I was working in schools, particularly as a business manager, you would often be the person that maybe they didn't want in the room, because you were often the person who would be saying, well, no, hang on, we can't afford that. Let's think about it before we make that decision.
You're the bad guy, Lee. You're the bad guy.
Yeah, and that's one of the myths of the business professional in schools, or the myths of the finance manager in schools, is that you're there to say no. And I don't think we are. We're there as the enabler, and that's what I try to get my team to work towards. So our setup now is that we've got finance partners that are linked to schools, and so they can have those conversations and make sure they're involved, so that schools aren't just having a great idea and working it through to a point and then saying, actually, hang on, we haven't talked to anyone in finance about this. Can we afford this? We're involved from the very start, and often the person who's the non-educator in the room will ask that stupid question that no one else has thought to ask, but actually is really important. And so that's why, again, with that collaboration, you've got to make sure that you've got people in that room that you wouldn't always think to invite. And maybe it's that finance person, or maybe it's the person who only has a really small input into sports and PE, but they do have an input. And so actually it's worth having a conversation with that person and bringing them into the meeting.
Definitely, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's get everyone in the same conversation so everyone can raise their perspectives, and it's something we talk about with regards to having other people's filters on. So it's very hard to put other people's filters on in a conversation when you've got your own filter. It's a natural thing. You have your own filter. It's built up from your own experiences, and it's so difficult to put your filter down and put someone else's filter on. And especially, from my perspective, putting a finance filter on from your perspective, Lee, because it's not something that we're all exposed to as much, and a lot of people aren't exposed to as much, it's hard to put that filter on. But when you start reflecting on what you said there, it's about any decision, you've got to look at the finance side of things. It's look at your own personal life. I don't mind sharing my wife she's gone back to university to train as a midwife, but the first conversation was, can this work financially? Not which universities are doing it and what do they need for you to get in, and so on and so forth. That was the second question. So it is relatable to all areas. But on the finance side of things, because this is a bit that I was really hoping to dig down in on for you, Lee, so apologies if I put you on the spot with some of this, but there's a lot of things going on with the current climate financially. So many things that are affecting people personally, but also schools and institutions with the size of their energy bills and whatnot that's going on. From what you understand, are there any different barriers and challenges facing state local authority schools than multi-academy trust schools, or are they similar barriers, or they're slightly different barriers? Because again, our listeners come from different backgrounds and different organisations.
There's always differences. It's a really good point, and I think so since joining education, I've only worked exclusively, other than a sort of small amount of time supporting a couple of schools, local authority schools, rather than academies or multi-academy trusts. So I've worked in the academy, multi-academy trust sector because that feels more like the background that I'm used to. And so a lot of my experience is in academies, and that's the big thing that's different for academies and multi-academy trusts to local authority schools is that ability to choose. If you're a multi-academy trust or you're an academy, you can choose your energy provider. You can choose who supplies your photocopier. And a lot of schools in local authorities don't have those choices. Some do, but majority of them don't, and majority of those choices are made for them by the local authority. And this is not me saying that they're bad choices by the local authority or good choices by the local authority, but the reason that a lot of schools jumped at the chance to become academies and jumped at the chance to become multi-academy trusts is because they had the ability to make those choices. They were leaders in the schools that thought we can do this ourselves. And so it's affected us differently because it means that dependent on the choices you've made, dependent on the choices of the length of contract you signed up to for your utilities, or the type of contract you signed up to for photocopying or operational support, that people are getting affected differently now. And so as a trust, we were lucky in the sense that we'd signed up to a decent term contract for our utilities, so we've not been impacted as much as some other trusts, but we will get that impact. The prices aren't ever going back down. So it's just bought us some time to be able to manage that change. But again, as a local authority school, you don't get that choice. You just get that outcome, which again, it depends on how you feel. It depends what kind of head teacher you are. Some head teachers don't want that responsibility. And I understand that because they're here as educators. They never became a teacher to come in and have to fix a boiler or come in and deal with a break-in at site. So I totally understand that. And again, that's kind of where the multi-academy trust comes in, is that you get that ability to choose, but then you've also got that support of the central team. And that's what we try to do, is we allow our schools to have that ability to make those decisions themselves, but they've got the support of a central team who'll take away some of those areas that head teachers did never join the profession to do.
It's that balance, isn't it, between responsibility and then reward, but also accountability. There's two ways it can go. You've got the responsibility and freedom to do things, within reason, more how you want to do them. But again, the reward and impact of that's fantastic, but also the accountability. If the wrong choices are made, come back to you centrally. There's not an external body you can kind of blame on that one. With regards to PE, anything to do with PE, school sport and physical activity, and the finances around that, do you know if there's any differences there between academy schools and local authority schools, whether it be equipment, procurement and so on?
I don't actually. So that's a really great answer to that question. Sorry. Again, I only know it from that academy point of view rather than from school's point of view. You guys will know that better than I do, because I'm sure you deal with schools as well as academies. So if you know, that's quite a nice way for me to find out.
Unfortunately, no, that's why I was asking you. But no, it's one of those, it's a good thing to find out. The sports premium, that is the same for everyone. I was just wondering, with that support side of things that you mentioned, if it's different local authority to multi-academy trust, whereby trusted providers of X, Y, and Z, or if there's that central support on spending for processes. Either Lee or Ollie, your experiences with those.
Yeah, I do think that. Oh, sorry, Ollie. I do think that schools have got the ability to sort of choose how they spend that sports premium. but it will vary by local authority to local authority in the same way as it will do multi-academy trust to multi-academy trust as to how involved they want to be. So I do believe there'll be a bit of an impact, but yeah, it'd be interesting. That's a bit of reading for me after we finished.
Yeah, no worries. That's something else we can delve into afterwards. Sticking on because I want to get the real link between the finance side of things and PE, and I know that some of this is factual, but some of this is your opinion, Lee. So let's put yourself into a hypothetical situation. Put you not to knock your career back, but back in the shoes of a business manager lead within a school. How would you, from a financial perspective, ensure that PE, school sport, and physical activity is at the heart of school life through effective budgeting or anything that you've got, any means you've got to your disposal, Lee? How would you go about really instilling PE, school sport, and physical activity throughout the school?
So making sure that school sport, PE, and physical activity is at the heart of school life. Obviously, firmly sits within the education team, but the finance team, as I said earlier, I think I feel that we are there to enable them to make sure that they're able to spend the funding that they get and make sure that they're able to provide this service. And so what we tended to do is make sure very specifically dealt with the area of making sure that budget was very visible, making sure that they were able to monitor it on a regular basis and have sort of live, up-to-date analysis of how they're spending it, so that when they're spending this sports premium budget, for example, if they think they're making an impact, or if they think that actually something needs to change, they can very quickly see what the financial impact of that change will be. And so we'd make sure that we wouldn't just deal with budgeting once a year. We would deal with that budget and we would have that initial budget conversation for plans for next year. But it's a sort of cyclical process. And so we would be consistently, on a monthly basis at minimum, talking to those key people to make sure that they understood what was being spent and how it was being spent. And yeah, it's all to do with that plan. In the same way as the school improvement plans are linked to budget, the plan of how you're going to spend your sports premium is very much linked to what money you've got to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of schools I speak to, a lot of PE leads, should I say, I speak to, they're aware of the budget, they've got some kind of involvement, but they're not necessarily leading on it. So I suppose that could be a big takeaway is those. And having those open conversations, PE leads having the confidence to have the open conversation in the sense of, I'm not involved in the budgeting, that's absolutely fine. However, what I'd like to do is set up maybe a monthly half an hour with this business manager to ensure that I'm on the same wavelength as them. It's not asking for the full responsibility of the sports premium, but it's a case of let's set up this communication channel. Let's make sure I'm on the same wavelength as the business manager.
Yeah, I'm really keen to make sure that people in schools who have got responsibility for a subject have also got, it might not always be that they've got the responsibility for the budget, but they've certainly got visibility of it. And they've certainly got an understanding of where that comes from and how it's made up, and how sort of it's been planned to spend, because it's really hard to do your job when you haven't got all the information in front of you. And as we've said, that's a really key part of the job. And Ollie hopefully will agree that that's what happened at the school we were working at, and he hopefully had the ability to do what he needed to do with the full picture.
Yeah, this is where you've been briefed on it, where you've got to say the right thing.
Absolutely, yes.
100%
yes is the answer.
No, but seriously, on that one, because we're getting Lee's perspective on things, but it's great that we can contrast it with Ollie. So Ollie, I suppose from your perspective, having come from working with Lee, working with BDMAT, were there any triumphs? That could be sporting, it could be PE, it could be just physical activity engagement. Were there any triumphs in BDMAT schools? You mentioned working across a few of them that happened due to the budget that you and Lee were able to organise for them.
I mean, yeah, there were loads that we managed to achieve. And if I start just as when Lee was business manager at one of the schools, we had sporting events throughout the year, but we also finished with a big sporting event throughout for that entire school, and that just sort of grew as my role grew through the Multi Academy Trust, where certainly with the Commonwealth Games, was that 2 years ago now?
No.
Was it 2 years ago?
No, it's last year.
It was last year, I think, wasn't it?
Last year. Yeah, sorry, it's been a while. So yeah, the Commonwealth Games was a huge thing throughout BDMAT, and that year we had a whole year of sporting events. And the way I looked at it, and working with Lee closely with his team as well, to make sure that it happened, was linking all those schools together through sport and through PE, and running sporting events. We had links from schools with our PE lessons, with our after-school clubs, through sporting events, tournaments, all that sort of stuff, and it all finished with a huge game at the BDMAT secondary school, where we had across an entire week. We had 100 kids a day, over 100 kids a day in some cases, competing for their school, but also getting to know all the other schools within the Multi Academy Trust, which was really, really good to see and absolutely fantastic. We had Bully the Bull from the Commonwealth Games. He was there. We had athletes down, and just to see what was going on there was absolutely fantastic as a triumph, and that couldn't have happened without the support of obviously everyone else within the management team as well, but also the finance team to make sure that it happened, because we had to provide transport and those sort of things. Everyone had to provide lunches, all that sort of stuff, as well as all like just the logistics of it, but all the bits behind the scenes as well for everyone to get involved. And that wouldn't have happened without collaboration with all of the schools put together, as well as the central team that was involved.
No, that's fantastic. And from an all-encompassing perspective, Lee, from your perspective of trying to get all the schools, and I suppose the MAT, to link up the finances to impact all those schools, was that a logistical nightmare, or was that actually quite a simple thing to do? How did you go about that from a financial perspective, so it impacted all the schools, and who kind of put what in?
So the way we set it up, the way we as a trust had set up our running of sports premium and sports in general that year, meant that we'd got Ollie in position as a sort of central role. And so it wasn't a case of us having to have sort of 19 different conversations with 19 different schools and then working out who does what. It was Ollie who coordinated it all, and there was an understanding that this is the end goal. We want our own sort of Commonwealth Games. We want an event that the pupils will remember and that the staff will remember going forward. And there's an understanding that this is our broad remit. Ollie's going to run with it. And so we made it so that what could have been a really logistical nightmare was actually really nice and neat, because we'd got someone as that sort of project manager role. Yeah. And that's something that you can be missing quite easily when you've got a trust of 19 schools, because everyone's got their own agenda, or they've got their own reasoning for something to happen. But our schools work really well together, and it was decided early on that that's how we wanted to work, and it worked really well.
Fantastic. It's another way of bringing it together, I suppose, isn't it? And for those not in any of our listeners not in a Multi Academy Trust, I suppose the missing link could be having that central person. So like you said, you had Ollie specifically employed to bring the schools together to create these events, and central point of contact and organisational point. What I've done with schools before who aren't in trusts, who haven't been in leagues, and I've worked with them, is I've encouraged a PE lead who's particularly passionate about creating these opportunities to become that link. There doesn't have to be an official school games link. There doesn't have to be an official Multi-Academy Trust link. It can be a case of, if you're in an area, you're a school that wants more opportunities, and you've got 5 schools in your area, what's stopping you making that exact same link with those 4 or 5 other schools, and putting on some kind of competition, going to St Luke's down the road and saying, you've got a massive field, why don't we collectively, we're really close, 3 of the schools can walk, there's only a couple that has to get a little minibus, create a competition between ourselves. It's not going to cost us entry into any kind of organisation, external organisation, partnership, or anything. So that's another way, I suppose, of any listeners who aren't from multi-academy trust and struggle for those opportunities. It just takes someone to initiate that conversation, I suppose.
Certainly, yeah, definitely. And even us in our sort of earlier stages of multi-academy trust, we hadn't got that position. We hadn't got Ollie in the role he was in. So we were still sort of finding our feet, and we got there eventually because of a couple of years of working out how's the best way to do this. And like you say, you just find someone who's got that keenness, who's got that drive to work together with other schools. You let them run with it. It doesn't have to be the CEO of a trust who projects manages it. It can be anyone who's got that interest, and like I say, it worked really well for us.
Brilliant. And again, trying to keep things on the line of the financial side of things and getting your perspective on this. With something like physical opportunities for children in schools, when you're a business manager in a school or across the trust, how do you track the success of the budget that you've allocated towards that when it's something related to physical activity? With numbers, and again, this is a stereotype of people like yourself, Lee, people in your positions, of everything must seem like it has to be black and white. There's numbers, there's an answer. How would you, from your perspective, track the success of a budget specifically to physical activity opportunities?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and my perspective of the success of that will be totally different to yours and totally different to that of a teacher. And you're right, in the simplest terms, in black and white, from our point of view, we want to know that if we've set a budget for that activity, that it's not been exceeded. But not just that we've spent as little as possible, that we've got the best value for money. So it's not a case of underspending your budget, it's a case of planning that budget correctly, planning that activity well, and getting the best value out of it. So yes, ultimately, everything we do is to get the best out of it for the pupils. But we need to, from my finance team point of view, need to make sure that funding balances with what we're spending. And so a successful project like that, from my point of view, is one, yes, we've got the feedback from the pupils, or we've got the results that we wanted from a learning perspective. But two, we've got that sort of effective and managed or balanced budget.
Yeah. And I suppose, again, getting the contrasting view, Ollie, on specifically that project you were talking about a moment ago, Lee's looking at, this is the budget. You've got Lee behind you cracking him up saying, Ollie, don't go past this figure, otherwise I'm going to have you. But, there's different perspective of what success looks like. How did it, from your perspective, come across with what were you aiming to achieve success?
So, yeah, for me, obviously, you do have that one eye on finances, and Lee sat there behind you going, don't go over budget, don't go over budget, don't go over budget. But then, I was there really just to try and provide the best experience and opportunity for the children. So although, yes, I did think about finances and things like that, but my sole focus was providing the best opportunity and the best experience for the children that were attending, as well as the schools and the staff involved. Because essentially, if the staff don't feel like they're not getting the best out of what's happening, they're not going to want to do it again, and they're the ones that are saying yes or no. And it sort of works hand in hand in that way, in the fact that if the children have a great time, then the staff are going to have a great time, and therefore they're going to want to do it again. And then you can expand, or you can make things better. You can do things differently. Maybe you could push the boundary a little bit more with the finance team and go, well, I want to try this time, and they'll know that from the feedback previously that it was a success. So maybe we could try and stretch the budget a little bit more to go where you want to go. So success breeds success, doesn't it? I think is the term.
Yeah.
And that, my version of success would be different to Lee's, but then they all intertwine.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's that thing of, and that's a really good point, that actually for the first time we work on a project together, the budget might be quite limited, because there's got to be that understanding. We've got to get to that stage where we're all comfortable that Ollie, for example, can manage that budget. And then the next project, you're right, was actually let's put a little bit more into this because it was really successful last time. Let's put a bit more into it. But there has got to be that limit, and it's the same in your personal life. If you want to go on holiday, you want to provide that best possible holiday for your family, but there is a limit on what you can spend, and you can still have a fantastic holiday going to Skegness. It doesn't have to be Disneyland, and so they're two extremes in many ways. However, that is sometimes what schools are dealing with. They'd love to take their children on holiday to Disneyland, say, but they understand that they're working with a budget that means they've got to go to somewhere on the English coast. And so actually you're working within your budget, but you're still providing those opportunities for the children, and the children sometimes don't mind. It's actually about the fact that we're spending that time with them and spending that, giving them that attention that they need.
And that can be translated to parenting. You always hear about it, don't you? They don't remember what kite you had as a parent when they were 4 or 5. They remember the times you had with them, and I suppose it's remembering that the amount of time that we're with these children, teachers with these children, day in, day out. You are a parent figure too, aren't they? These experiences formulate the people they're going to become. Okay, so bringing things kind of towards the end now. Just a bit. It's a bit open, this question, but I wanted to ask it. I want to get your opinion. It's not PE specifically focused, but what does the future look like in your eyes, Lee, for multi-academy trusts? There's lots at the moment, the white paper about schools nudging towards multi-academy trusts and so on. What in your opinion, is going on with multi-academy trusts, and what does it look like for the future?
Yes, that is a broad question, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. The current government seem really keen to get schools to academise and form multi-academy trusts. So I think in 5 years or by 2030, whatever sort of time frame you're looking at, there's going to be a lot more multi-academy trusts out there. There's going to be many more of these larger multi-academy trusts, I think. And I think we'll see some really effective and strong trusts that they're in the lucky position in a sense that they've learned from some of the trailblazers, some of those multi-academy trusts that started sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've learned from some of the sort of mistakes even that those trusts have made. And so the kind of thing I think that we'll see, and I look forward to seeing, is a lot more sort of inter-trust collaboration. So it's not just a case of saying we've got 19 schools and they're all working together. It's a case of we've got 2 trusts with 19 schools and they're all working together. And our trust recently has been doing some work with a trust in Liverpool, which a few years ago even, but just pre-COVID, that wouldn't have happened. But we now got the ability to meet on a regular basis with a trust that's up the other side of the country. And so, I think that there's a real appetite for choice out there. And some schools struggle with that under the local authority approach. And so I think they'll be really keen to sort of get out there and have a look at these multi-academy trusts and see what's available.
Yeah, I can't sing the praises of collaboration enough. And it's a saying that we go by in the sense of not one person, organisation, group of schools, not one institution can solve all the multiple pandemics that are still going on with regards to obesity, physical inactivity, depravity of learning, and so on and so forth. There is not one person who has the answer. A collaborative approach must happen, and in multiple sectors, I think you can start seeing barriers coming down now. So it's great to hear that that's happening between multi-academy trusts as well. That's fantastic. Right, pearls of wisdom time.
Oh gosh,
pearls of wisdom time. So we always like to give our listeners some top tips to go away with, and we've had some gems throughout this. So thanks very much for imparting your knowledge. But quick fire. I've had a couple of listeners say that sometimes they listen to it but jump to it a little bit towards the end of these top 5 tips because they are the golden gems. So what would your top 5 tips be for those teams who are influencing PE but also the budget for PE in supporting them to create that top-down physical active ethos in a primary school setting in particular?
Okay then. So top 5. First one, I would always say start with planning. So plan. When we're talking about how we're spending that budget or how we're dealing with it, sports premium is going to be here for a few more years. So you've got the opportunity now to plan for more than just a year in advance. So make the most of it, get some planning in place. Second, I'm a big fan of process. I think I mentioned that earlier. Once you've got a plan, get that process agreed because everyone knows what what's happening then. Everyone knows expectations and how we're going to achieve it, and you can't get that without a process in place. Third thing I would say is get expertise in. So whether it's someone in-house or whether it's an external company, get some expertise. Don't ask me to decide what you're doing with your sports premium, for example, because what I give you will not be the right answer. Get an expert in who knows how to deal with that funding specifically. For budget, so make sure that you've got a budget in place, and it's a robust budget, and it's a sensible budget, it's an achievable one, because that's part of that planning. That gives you an opportunity to know what you're going to do, again, for the potentially the next couple of years. And then 5, I'll go back to collaboration. All of this that I've just talked about in the other 4 is do it all creatively, but do it with collaboration, get everyone involved. Don't be scared to talk to the people in the finance team, get them involved from the start. And likewise, get people involved who you might not usually talk to about this kind of thing, because they'll be the people who give you the ideas that you weren't thinking of. They'll be thinking outside of the box. Speak to other trusts, speak to other schools in your trust. I think that would be what I'd suggest for my 5.
You really want to dispel the myth of finance leads, don't you? With the guys, we are friendly people, really.
As Ollie will say, I've been involved in sports days. I've sat out there and got sunburnt with the protecting the kids with all the shade, and I've been the one out there getting sunburnt on sports days. And likewise, I would say to the guys who work in finance or the sort of business managers and the admin teams, get involved in the school, because that's what we're about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, some great gems there. I can't agree more with the collaboration side of things. And sometimes that is the hardest step, to be open and go and have those conversations. Someone's got to start that conversation. Otherwise, if everyone's thinking the same thing and someone else will start it soon, no one will start it. So pluck up that courage and have those conversations. What's the worst that's going to happen at the end of the day is the idea's not going to work, so we go make another idea. We learn from it. So, no, thank you so much for those pearls at the end, and thanks for all the wisdom you've shared throughout. It's been great to get a very different perspective, and yourself, Ollie, as well, having been able to collaborate with that perspective and give your own on the same situations. Hopefully, has really helped some of our listeners and given some great ideas as well. So, just want to say once again, thanks, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Really good talking to you.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for the Primary PE Huddle podcast, and remember to subscribe wherever you access your pods, so you don't miss an episode and the key gems our fantastic guests share for you. You can connect with us on Twitter or X at Aspire Sports UK, and find out more about us and the family at www.aaeg.co.uk and www.aspire-ed.co.uk for PE CPD related courses and more content. Hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.